check. So I just request Secretariat to please just suggest if my audio is clear and quite visible as well. I'm visible.
Yes, sir. Sir, Dr. Amit is has joined, sir, and you are visible. Your audio is very clear, sir.
Perfect. Thank you
Yes.
so much for confirmation. I really appreciate
Yeah.
your
Thank you.
continued hard work, efforts, and
Thank you, sir.
consistent support. A very warm welcome to all the dignitaries, esteemed speakers, panelists, and guests. I'm Dr. Pavan K. Gupta, Executive Committee Member, AUSD, and Secretary, AUH Haryana Branch. It's a matter of extreme pleasure to get the opportunity to co-host this 48th edition of our ENOC webinar initiative. We have tried to be consistent, and we have reached a milestone of 48 webinars till now. We are just 2 more webinars to make a half century. And it has been possible only because of your continued support, engagement, and consistent approach towards it. Gratitude and thanks for that. I will try to do justice to the role of hosting this webinar as our consistent and esteemed host, a permanent face, Dr. Sandeep Sharma, will be joining us in a while. He is engaged in a meeting. Dr. Sharma, as we all know, is Secretary IOH and AUSD. In the meanwhile, we will take the proceedings further, and just to mention how we are, what we have planned as we have been circulating over the social media platforms and informing everyone. We'll have a session by our esteemed invited guest speaker, and followed by EPID update as with due consideration of the current upsurge in the cases, and it will be by none other than our very own Senior Vice President, Dr. Rajiv Kumar Jain. He has been quite consistent and he has been educating us all through this, and we have come to a stage wherein we look forward to what Dr. Jain has to present and share with us. I'm so thankful to you, Dr. Pingle, for welcoming me in my new role. My pleasure. Thank you so much, Dr. Pingle. Considering the worsening situation of COVID-19 pandemic, we have requested Dr. Jain, as I mentioned, and today he will be sharing his thoughts on the same. So without any further delay, I would request, I begin and humbly request Dr. Gajendra Kumar, President AUSD, to please give the welcome address and declare the session open, and accordingly I'll be taking it ahead. Over to Dr. Gajendra Kumar.
Thank you, Dr. Pavan Kumar Gupta.
Thank you so much.
And welcome as a co-host in the program.
My pleasure, sir.
Good evening, friends. Today I welcome all of you to this 48th issue of our webinar, which we are having since last March. And Dr. Gupta was telling that we will be completing 50. I think the way the things are moving in the country and globally, we can, in one day we will be completing 1 century of the series, because as you know, Corona has come back. And so with these, today we have got our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Amit Upadhyay, who is a leading hematologist, and he shall be discussing on chronic myelogenous leukemias. See, with this Corona everywhere, all other and as far as the illness pattern in the community is concerned, but they are gone into the background. But it is very apt to invite speaker like Dr. Amit to update us on such issues as well. So I welcome you, Dr. Amit, to this series. I also welcome my all other members and participants, and our Senior Vice President, Dr. R.K. Jain, who will also be speaking on the epidemic update in the country. So with these few words, I welcome you all and I hand over to Dr. Pawan Gupta to further proceed.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind gesture. And yes, with your blessings and the consistent support that we have been getting all through this time, definitely we'll be reaching many milestones as we have seen previously as well. I cordially welcome Dr. Amit Upadhyay. Such a pleasure to get the opportunity to welcome you at this platform, Dr. Upadhyay. And as we have seen the topic that Dr. Upadhyay is going to share his thoughts on how to suspect chronic myelogenous leukemia early. And this is considering our non-COVID patients, because we have to be consistent in that as well. Definitely COVID is taking all the seat, as Dr. Gajendra Kumar has just now mentioned, that has taken all the focus, but then we have to take into consideration our non-COVID patients as well. And for the same, it's a gratitude and thanks to Dr. Amit Upadhyay for taking our time. Very warm welcome, Dr. Upadhyay. I will be sharing a brief introduction, and then I will be handing over the stage to you, Dr. Upadhyay. Hope you can hear us and we are clearly visible. We cannot hear you, Dr. Upadhyay. If you can just unmute, and so we'll just check the mic.
Am I audible?
Absolutely wonderful, Dr. Upadhyay. Thank you so much. Yeah. So Dr. Upadhyay is a senior consultant hematologist, PSRA Hospital and New Delhi and Kailash Hospital, Noida. Dr. Upadhyay is a renowned hematologist of Delhi NCR. He has more than 19 years of experience in this field and has been treating all hematological disorders successfully since then by using all the latest drugs and treatment protocols. He has completed MBBS from Gajra Raja Medical College in 2000 and MD from Devi Ahilya Vishwavidyalaya in 2005. He has expertise in cancer specialists, yeah.
Mostly hemato-oncology.
Yeah. Ocular oncology, medical oncology, head and neck cancer, breast cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, uro-oncology, etc. That's a wide range of experience. Dr. Upadhyay, the accumulated experience he has gathered during this time has made him the ideal person to successfully diagnose and treat blood cancers like leukemia, lymphoma, and myeloma. He also treats patients with other non-cancerous hematological conditions like anemia, low platelets, thalassemia, aplastic anemia, and bleeding and coagulation disorders like hemophilia. Using a mixture of treatment protocols and knowledge of the latest drugs, Dr. Amit bases his diagnosis on grounded knowledge and cutting-edge diagnostics. That's wonderful, Dr. Upadhyay, to have such an expert and experienced person among us. We are privileged. Thank you so much once again for sparing your time. The stage is all yours. Over to Dr. Upadhyay, please.
Well, thanks for the warm words, first of all. And it's my pleasure, my privilege to be a part of this association. And it's really wonderful to share platform with doctors, because especially you are sitting in the periphery, you are the first point of contact to the patient. And then only the patient comes to us, whether they are referred by surgeon or by the physicians or by pathologist or wherever. So it is probably you people are the most important persons who picks up diseases at the early stage. And it is precisely the reason that it is very, very important to be aware of that. How can we pick up the diseases early? Because we all know that early disease pickup means it will translate to a better outcome. So it's again my pleasure. And let me share my screen if I can do that. I'm not good in computers, but let's hope. Yes. Is it visible now?
Yes, we can see the screen, Dr. Upadhyay, very well. And we can hear you clearly as well. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes. You can probably shift it to the presentation mode.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, it's down here, where the side down bar, the third icon which looks like a cup. This one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So typically, what happens that we got this is a brief patient history, which is fairly common. 1 or 2 patients in a year we got this, but typical this presentation. that some middle-aged person, let's say this is a 40-year-old, 45-year-old male patient, he got his annual checkup done. The TLC was slightly on the higher side, but nobody paid much attention. Okay, it may be some UTI, it may be some URI, something like that. The more the issues were taken with the cholesterol levels and the triglyceride levels, because he was not having other than that, I'm okay otherwise. So that's okay. But what happens, gradually his asthenia, his weakness increases, keep on increases, and he gradually has early satiety, low appetite, and all these things, followed by some left flank pain, which he could not describe because of splenomegaly, but once the physician could take it out, okay, it looks like that you have a large spleen. And on that evaluation, which was done after 6 months, he was found that WBCs were higher from 15,000 to they are now 37,000, 2% blast, left shift on the peripheral hemogram, spleen was 6 centimeter, hemoglobin was slightly on the lower side, suspected as CML, cytogenetics was done, bone marrow was done, and the diagnosis was confirmed as a CML chronic phase. That happens all the time. Now, important is all these three things, that why we have chose CML. Again, why the early diagnosis is important. And third is how we can diagnose that. So we will spend few minutes on each of these things. To start with, it is CML, chronic myelocytic leukemia. So chronic means which is on a certain period of time it is taking to develop. It may be few months to few years. Myelogenous because it is being produced in the bone marrow and it is affecting the myeloid series. And it is diffuse replacement of marrow. It is a generalized involvement of bone marrow, which is typical of leukemia. So these three things, chronic, myeloid, and leukemia. So lymphoma, they are having a focal involvement of bone marrow. In leukemia, it is a generalized thing. So here we are dealing with a leukemia, which is chronic in nature. So that goes in years and it affects our WBCs. So this is the CML. If we recall some diagram from physiology or books, then this is the development chart of a normal maturation in the bone marrow which happens. That we have myeloblast, then from myeloblast there are different steps and they eventually develop into basophil, eosinophil and neutrophils. This precise cycle got disturbed in CML. So what we see a large increase in the number of WBCs involving all the cells. They are promyelocyte, they are myelocyte, they are myeloblast, they are basophil, they are eosinophil, neutrophil, and in later stage we can see an increase in platelets also. In many patients of CML, they actually can present with high platelet count. This is one of the common cancer and almost 5 to 10 cases per 1 lakh population. This I am referring to a Western data. It accounts for 15 to 20% of all adult leukemias. So in adult leukemia, this is very common. Second most common in Western world, but in India, it is the most common. In Western countries, what we see is the median diagnosis at 55 to 60 years, and it is rare in children. But Indian scenario is a bit different. In India, it is almost 50 to 60% patients of adult leukemia which have CML. So it is the most common cancer in adults, most common leukemia in adults which we see. Male to female is favoring male. Median age of diagnosis is 32 years. Again, it is all the more important because it is affecting young patients rather than being the elderly, which we see in the Western countries. At almost 90% patients, they present with chronic phase, which is again a good thing because in chronic phase, we can treat them in a much, much better way. Most common symptoms are splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, fatigue, pain, pallor, but look at the last line. In almost 25-30% patients, it can be asymptomatic. And this is precisely the most important thing, that we can pick it up even before it is producing symptoms. if it is picked up early, that means age is more than 40, low SOCAL scale, and if the remission is good, then we can actually expect a survival as of a general population. So this is the important thing, that early pickup will lead to probably a normal survival. Now, why it happens? A bit slightly we will go into pathophysiology, only briefly. You all must have heard of a term which is called Philadelphia chromosome or BCR-ABL. So Philadelphia chromosome is a chromosome which was resulted in the fusion of two genes, the BCR and the ABL. What is happening is that there are one enzyme in the body which is called tyrosine kinase. So somebody is raising hand. Should I stop right now or later on?
Yeah, so Dr. Upadhyay, we will take the questions after your session, and we are taking all the questions in the notes as well as the queries with us.
Yes, okay.
To continue the flow, yeah.
So there is an enzyme in the body which is called tyrosine kinase. So what this BCR-ABL will do, it permanently activates the tyrosine kinase. So the cells continuously goes on in the proliferative phase. So they just keep on increasing. There is no check on their number. And this is what the basic pathophysiology. And because this is a precise pathophysiology, we can actually target it. So this is the BCR-ABL, and this is the defining criteria of a CML. Now, as our topic of today's, as I mentioned earlier, that we have to diagnose this early. Now, why and what is happening? Now, CML is not like any other solid tumor, which we say lung cancer or a liver cancer or wherever. Here, what is happening, if you see the graphs, in 1970, the survival of a CML patient was somewhere around 5%. In 2000, gradually from 90s to 2000, it was slight increase because we have cytarabine and we have bone marrow transplant with us and interferon. So survival becomes somewhere around 30%. But what is happening afterwards? You can see that now with the latest drugs, the survival in CML is approaching as of a normal general population. So that means if we are picking up the disease, if we are treating it well, then in almost 90-95% of patients, we can expect a survival which is of general population. And this is something which was unheard of. In 2000, before 2000 era, CML was hardly 20-30% 10-year survival. Now it is 92 to 93% 10-year survival. So this is something which is really remarkable. Again, this is an outcome, and you can see that in young ages, it is almost flat. It is very rare that to have a mortality because of CML nowadays. See the survival. These are different studies, different data, but again, all are saying the same thing, that now we have a survival which is as good as a normal general population. And this is precisely the reason that we should be able to pick this disease early. Now, what happens that whenever a patient comes to us, then what are the signs or what are the things that make you suspect that it can be a CML patient? First of all, common symptoms are there. Usually fatigue will be there, weakness will be there. Patient can have an early satiety or a flank pain sort of thing because of splenomegaly. Many times patient comes in advanced stage, they just have splenomegaly. Importantly, what happens that when we order a blood test, we got a higher WBC count. If the disease is fairly advanced, it can be 30, 40, 50,000. If it is not that advanced, in that stage, it can still be somewhere around 10, 15, 20,000. I remember almost 3-4 months back, we have a patient with renal stone, and he was referred to us by urologist basically for the evaluation of persistently high WBC, which was somewhere around 13,000. Initially, it was thought that maybe because of he is having a renal stone, multiple times UTI was happening, so that he was put on multiple courses of antibiotics, but the counts remain high. And his BCR-ABL was done, it comes positive. So surprisingly, it was a case of CML actually in a very early stage. So we could pick at that time. So any patient with a persistently high WBC, and in peripheral smear, when we got it done, there are no cancer cells, no blast cells, then definitely we have to think of that, can it be a CML or not? So common symptoms will be weakness, fatigue, infections, or spontaneous bleeding episode if the platelets are high. In common signs, it will be splenomegaly, CBC, yes. It will give us first idea that whether there is a higher WBC count. There will be left shift. Left shift means the premature WBCs. That means the band cells, promyelocytes, myelocyte, myeloblast, they all will come. Basophil can be high and platelet can be high. So this is a typical picture of CML. And usually we got a splenomegaly. So yes, once we say CML, then bone marrow at baseline is usually done, and then it was confirmed on the basis of marrow cytogenetics and BCR-ABL. But first suspicion will be arises with WBC. This is the normal WBC, which we say RBCs are there, leukocytes are there, and platelets are there with the normal range. But what happens in chronic NCML? WBC is usually more than 20. Oh, yes. Let me tell you other thing. With this, we are talking about chronic phase. After chronic, the phases will be accelerated and blast. But very few patients will come to us in OPD with accelerated or blast crisis. 90-95% will come with chronic phase. So it is important to understand properly about the chronic phase. So in chronic phase, WBC will be high, blast will be low, there may be 2-3-4% blast, not more than that. Basophils will be high, platelet will be either normal or low or high, sorry. And if we do a bone marrow, the cellularity will be high. Then what will happen in accelerated and blast crisis? That the percentage of blast will go up. In accelerated 15-30%, and in blast more than 30%. And platelet will go down. In accelerated, they can be low, but in blast crisis, they will invariably be low. But we hardly see them upfront. Now for diagnosis, as I told, diagnosis will be confirmed on bone marrow. We got a Philadelphia chromosome and a BCR-ABL. Philadelphia chromosome usually is done nowadays by FISH, not by conventional cytogenetics. And the BCR-ABL by RT-PCR testing. RT-PCR is nowadays is the gold standard because it's very sensitive. It can be performed easily on peripheral blood. So we can follow it up on regular basis, not doing bone marrow on a regular basis, which we used to almost 15 years back, but not nowadays. And they are extremely sensitive, affordable, and easily available nowadays. And now as our sensitivity of picking up the disease is increasing, we are gradually developing more sensitive tests. Initially blood, then we come on chromosomes, cytogenetics, then comes FISH, and now to molecular testing. So again, the disease progression, if we are seeing a patient of CML without any treatment, so this is the natural history. So chronic phase will be there for 4 to 6 years. Then up to 1 year then it will gradually progress to accelerated phase, which will last somewhere around a year, and it will land into blast crisis. That means it has turned into from chronic to acute leukemia, which can be AML, which can be ALL or something like that, with an extremely poor prognosis, and it is rapidly fatal. Now, as I mentioned that from 2000 onwards, we have TKIs with us, tyrosine kinase inhibitor, or the commonly known drugs like imatinib, dasatinib, nilotinib, and bosutinib. There are 4 drugs which are currently approved. Other treatment is hardly nowadays being done like BOMT and all that, unless it is a refractory one. So most commonly we use TKI, and you can think of the impact they made. That initially when the TKIs were come, we were thinking that yes, now the disease can be controlled. And in last 5 years, what we are thinking that, okay, the patient is there. There is a term now called treatment-free remission. That means, can I do treatment for 4 or 5 years and whether it can be stopped? So that means, can we cure CML? The word cure is important. It was not being used early. It was treated like somebody is having diabetes. Okay, you keep on taking medicines lifelong. But nowadays, almost 50% of patients which got extremely good response, that is the DMR, we can actually stop the TKI, whether it is imatinib or dasatinib or nilotinib, and the disease doesn't come back. So imagine that in last 20 years, from a 30% year survival, 30% 10-year survival, we are coming to a phase that we are talking in terms of, can we stop the disease, stop the medicines after 5 years and you will be cured. So this just shows that how the biology of the disease has impacted treatment. And these are extremely tolerable and very patient-friendly medicines now. So when we treat CML, we see hematological response, cytogenetic response, or the molecular response. Hematologically means we started treatment and gradually the CBC normalizes. That is hematological response. Cytogenetics means all the Philadelphia chromosome gone. This is cytogenetic. And molecular means all the traces of BCR-ABL, they are gone. And nowadays, mostly we follow molecular response. So as I told you earlier, right now, that our goals have been changing. Initially, when the treatment of CML was done with busulfan and hydroxyurea in 70s, 80s, it was just, okay, keep your hemogram as normal as possible for whatever duration we will keep. Then when we defined, okay, this is the Philadelphia chromosome which is causing the disease, then the treatment was targeted towards normalizing bone marrow. And in 2000, the term called MMR, that means major molecular response. So major molecular response means that you are attaining 1000% log reduction. That means the disease is now 0.1%, less than 0.1%. It is 10 to power minus 3 response. And nowadays we are talking about DMR, the deep molecular response. That is log minus 4.5 reduction or more. This is the more and more sensitivity which we are doing. So these are the same thing, that cytogenetics and molecular response, how they fare when we take them together. But let me tell you that nowadays we do bone marrow only at the diagnosis, not on follow-up. So cytogenetics we are not monitoring nowadays. It is only molecular which we follow. So 2 log reduction in means, let's say somebody is coming with a BCR-ABL of 80%. So 2 log means 0.8%. This will correspond to complete cytogenetic response. Again, 10 log minus 1 reduction, that means 10% reduction means MMR. And further, that means minus 4.5. And if it is undetectable, that is called deep molecular response. And this is what our treatment target nowadays. We are not just happy that somebody is attaining a normal hemogram, a normal life, or a normal cytogenetic response, but we are looking for deep molecular response, because in that subgroup, we can actually stop treatment after some time. Now, those who has attained deep molecular response, they have low risk of progression of the disease in future, if at all, and possibility of discontinuing therapy without recurrence. Now, if we see the data, what they say, what studies said, that we are seeing, okay, we started imatinib to somebody, and after 3 months, we assessed that how the patient has responded. So those who have achieved a BCR-ABL status of less than 10% at 3 months, see the red curve, their survival is almost, you can say 90-92%. But in those who did not responded, see the graph, it's hardly 60% 10-year survival. We don't want that 60%. We want to pick that up early and modify the disease course, and we want it almost 100%. So it is very important to see that how the disease is responding at 3 months. That is a very important criteria. You must be hearing this term like deep molecular response and minus 4.5 reduction. So this is a graphical representation that how the disease volume will look like. So from 100%, we are coming to minus 4.5. See how less the disease becomes over a period of time. In those patients who are attaining MR 4.5 negativity, it is 92% 8-year overall survival. That means almost 90% or more patients are alive, healthy, even after 8 years of diagnosis of the disease. This is as good response as a general population. This is again a graphical representation that those who are attaining a MR of 4.5, there is no progression in accelerated blast phase. But if we are sticking to MMR, there are few patients who actually progressed. While those who attain deep molecular response, that means the disease which is extremely sensitive to the medicines, that there is no progression. And in fact, in half of those patients, when we stop the medicines, the disease did not come back. That means we cured CML. So as I told, achievement of DMR is associated with low risk of progression, and patient with sustained DMR can be eligible for TFR studies. This is how we do that. Patient, when we diagnose CML, he has to be monitored every 3 months until remission is achieved, and then after every 6 months till the time the disease is there. But if at any point of time the response, the BCR-ABL started increasing, then we need to follow that why it is increasing, whether the patient has stopped the drugs or the disease is coming back, it acquired some mutation, become refractory, something like that. This is our warning signs. The most important warning sign is BCR-ABL at 3 months, which the value is of more than 10%. If it is there, this is a big warning sign. We have to change the medicine or look at the reason that why it is still low. So yes, this is an older slide, but yes, now the disease control, from the disease control, we have come to the targeting, that can we cure the patient, and how it will affect that patient will not have to take further medicines. His cost will be subsided, will be less. There will be no further side effect of the drug. And because the patient is not taking any drug, the quality of life will be better. Thank you.
Wonderful insights, Dr. Upadhyay. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. At few places, it was quite a bit technical for me, at least for me. But then great to learn about various modalities. And as you said, that,
sorry to interrupt, but important thing is that because this forum is primarily for all the people who have joined. So, and they are actually dealing with those patients who are coming their clinics, and they have the real-time scenarios with them. So basically important, and probably they all knows about CML, that what it is, maybe fairly things, but important is that whatever they are encountering, and if they are having some doubts about that thing, then probably that will be better. That discussion will be better rather than is a one way.
Yeah. So we have some questions, and as you rightly noticed, there was a raised hand as well. So to start with, I will probably take up the first question, and then we will check with Dr. Damodar Lille. He has some question in his mind, and also we have a Q&A box as well where there is another question. So the first question that has been received by us is the relevance of molecular monitoring and what should be the frequency.
So I showed the slide also.
Yeah.
Initially, it is at the baseline, then at 3 months, and then every 3 months till the time it becomes negative.
Okay.
And once it is negative, then every 6 months.
Perfect. Can we take the question from the Q&A one? That is CML among meat cutters and butchers. Your experience, CML among other sectors of workers. That's by Rajamanikam.
I can't say frankly.
Okay.
I have never encountered this something occupational about CML. No, other than one observation that probably in that we can say a lower socioeconomic strata patient, we tend to diagnose the disease at the later stage because in general they keep on ignoring the symptom. They don't go to the doctors that frequently. While in a higher socioeconomic strata, probably because they are more aware, they got the tested frequently, and they approach to doctors, and they have availability of doctors on better profile.
Okay.
So we tend to pick up disease early in that. Probably other than this, I haven't encountered anything.
No problem. This box will be live whenever you think that maybe we will be able to present an answer. We can definitely.
I got a question from Dr. Amit.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Please.
Compliment Dr. Amit for the wonderful presentation. And you have simplified the thing so well that everything is understood by everyone.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Now, my question is 2 points I would like to know. Number one, for how long the patient has to undergo treatment for the total that deep molecular remission? This is for one. And number two, normally, what is the total cost to achieve that stage?
Okay, sir. सर जब हम बात करते हैं पेशेंट डीप मॉलिक्यूलर रिस्पांस में
जी
तो प्रोबेबली आपका क्वेश्चन इस तरफ से है कि बिफोर स्टॉपिंग ट्रीटमेंट हाउ लॉन्ग वी वांट द पेशेंट टू बी इन डीएमआर एट लीस्ट
एब्सोल्युटली यस
सो फ्रॉम द टाइम ही अटेंड डीएमआर at least 2 years. All the guidelines are uniform on that at least 2 years the patient should be in sustained DMR. That means the DMR should not be lost. That we got, let's say, patient who got a DMR in January 2018. So, and we are getting it BCR Abildon every 6 months. So, from at least 2020 January, all the reports should be negative. And also important is that not all the labs are testing for DMR.
Okay.
Now, 3 or 4, all the prominent labs like the SRL, the LAL, and the Core, Onquest, which are the major ones, they are testing for DMR, but not the routine ones. They are still taking that load up to 10 to power minus 3. We want 10 to power minus 4.5. That is called the DMR. So that is one important thing to see.
Okay.
So at least sustain DMR of 2 years. उसके बाद we can attempt कि हाँ stop करके हम देख सकते हैं.
टोटल कॉस्ट कितना आता है एक पेशेंट को इस स्टेज तक पहुंचने में?
दूसरी बात ये DMR can be achieved with any. Imatinib के साथ जो डेटा है, maybe we have planned a session only on treatment. Probably we will discuss it that time. But यूजुअली इमेटिनिब के साथ डीएमआर आने में थोड़ा समय ज्यादा लगता है, बट इमेटिनिब इज मच चीपर नाउ. एनी गुड क्वालिटी इमेटिनिब इन इंडिया इज समवेयर अराउंड 1500 to 2000 रुपी पर मंथ नाउ इट इज. बट जो 2 और मॉलिक्यूल हैं, द डेसाटिनिब एंड द निलोटिनिब, वो दोनों दे हैव बीन प्रूव्ड दैट उनसे ज्यादा डीप रिस्पांस मिलता है और जल्दी मिलता है.
ओके.
नाउ इट इज डेसाटिनिब has become cheaper क्योंकि उसके generics आ गए हैं, but still Tasigna जो है, that is nilotinib, that is with Novartis only, और उसका कॉस्ट पड़ता है शायद 6-7 हजार रुपया महीना, मतलब if the patient is paying from the pocket, including all the assistance programs and all.
Okay.
So now it has become fairly affordable also.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we can expect a DMR within 2 years with the use of these molecules.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much, Dr. Upadhyay, for taking up that. A query from Dr. Lele. It's in the chat box as well. And Dr. Lele, you can ask the question yourself. I request Secretariat to please allow. Yeah, Dr. Lele, if you are available, you can please.
Yeah, I am available. It was excellent presentation, very simple and lucid.
Yeah.
See, when he was showing the slide, that time the first slide, which was showing the case, there only complete blood count was mentioned. There were no details of peripheral blast cells or what. So
इसीलिए मैं ट्राई किया था, मैंने थोड़ा सा बताने को कि नॉर्मली क्या दिखता है.
नहीं, but was that the reason that it was missed?
No, it was not missed, sir. The thing
because it was detected later after 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, see, let me tell you. सबसे पहले यूजुअली जब काउंट आपका 20,000 से कम होगा, उस वक्त सिर्फ न्यूट्रोफिल होंगे जो थोड़े से हायर साइड पे होंगे. देयर विल बी नो अदर सेल्स, so there will be no myelocyte, metamyelocyte at that stage. They come in picture when the TLC crosses 20,000. So probably that might be the reason that somebody who just overlook, okay ठीक है, आप ठीक हो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, 15,000 हैं, हो सकता है एक थोड़े दिन बाद करा लेना, देख लेंगे फिर से, and वो casually miss हो गया, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lele. Thank you so much, Dr. Upadhyay. And we have Dr. Pentapati, who wishes to ask some question. Dr. Siva Santosh Kumar Pentapati. Dr. Pentapati, if you, he has definitely complimented that it was an excellent presentation. But if you have any, you have raised your hand, please.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please. We can hear you.
Sir, my doubt got cleared, sir. Already Kajendra sir have asked that.
Okay.
The 6 months molecular monitoring till when we have to do. So sir has already told that till 2 years. So my doubt got cleared, sir. That's why I lowered the hand also.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siva. And thank you so much for your compliment as well. I have another question quickly, Dr. Upadhyay. How to choose TKI in younger patients and patients with high social risk?
देखिए, यंग पेशेंट्स में यूजुअली हम लोगों के सामने अलग कंसर्न होती हैं. लाइक देयर इज वन लेडी हु इज नॉट मैरिड, 27-year-old. She was diagnosed some 6 months back. So we have questions about that. She will be married, she will be pregnant, and what will be the impact of those TKI at that point of time.
Okay.
So now in that scenario, what our priority will be to achieve DMR as soon as possible. Okay. We want early. So that before marriage or pregnancy, probably we will look at the possibility कि हम उसे रोक पाएं दवाई को, because we don't want the fetus to be exposed to those things.
Okay.
So definitely in young piece, we in younger population हमारी कोशिश होती है सेकंड जनरेशन TKI देके, जिससे हम अचीव जो रेमिशन है DMR उसे जल्दी अचीव कर पाएं, और मे बी उसके बाद हम कोशिश कर पाएं अपना ट्रीटमेंट फ्री रेमिशन के लिए.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. And a quick one is, which TKI is having good TFR data? You mentioned about the latest one, probably so if you can just, yeah.
For TFR, definitely all those second generation are the better. We have 3 TKI in the second generation. Maximum data is with dasatinib or nilotinib. We have very few with bosutinib, but I am not saying that it is inferior. It is just that it is not that frequently used. It has some bad side effects also.
Okay.
So both dasatinib and nilotinib are good, extremely good. And I won't say that there is difference of hardly plus minus 1 or 2% between them.
Okay.
There are different set of patients where we prefer one over the other. More or less both are equal.
Okay.
In young, definitely we want imatinib to take a back seat.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Dr. Upadhyay, probably the second last question on my list is, at what time we should choose to switch for second gen TKI? Any specific timeline for that?
I told you that the most important time is at when we are diagnosing, when we started TKI, and what is the value of BCR-ABL after 3 months of starting. If it is more than 10%, we have to switch TKI. If it is imatinib, we have to change to nilotinib or dasatinib. If it is, let's say, somebody is on dasatinib, we may need to either increase the dose or change to nilotinib or vice versa. So the 3-month point is very important one.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Upadhyay. And the last question from my side, and then probably, if at all any more questions from the audience or the panelists or our guests, it will be, we'll really welcome that. First line is better option to switch second line generation TKI or in second line?
Pardon, I didn't get.
First line is a better option to switch second generation TKI.
You have to make your question a bit more clear.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not getting
so maybe it's the question where I received the question, maybe I'll take further inputs from the person and then probably pose the question here.
So probably what the question is that should we use those higher or more potent one right from the beginning?
Absolutely.
As a first line.
First line is better portion to switch. Yeah.
So let me tell you one thing, that imatinib produces response in a more gradual way, slowly. While the second generation one, they produce more rapid response, more deeper response, but gradually the curve merges. So all the 3 TKI have similar 10-year survival.
Okay.
So if we are seeing the situation that yes, the disease is high, the rate of, let's say the TLC value is somewhere around 4 lakh, 5 lakh or something like that. There is a huge splenomegaly. So we are looking at a gross tumor burden. In that scenario, we can prefer a more potent ones.
Okay.
Or in the younger population where we want to attain DMR early, we tend to prefer second generation TKI.
Okay.
In low risk disease, all three are same.
Perfect. I think that answers most of the questions that we got and we received. Thank you so much, Dr. Upadhyay, for that illustrative discussion and also presentation. If there are no more questions, then I would definitely thank you on behalf of AUHG community, all panelists, guests, and definitely our speakers who have been always part of it. And it has been real privileged having you here. As a token of appreciation, I think we definitely have a certificate as well.
We will send to Dr. Amit directly, sir.
Thank you.
Perfect. That sounds really good. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. With that, we come to end of first session, and definitely we are moving on to the EPID update session from here on. Once again, thank you, Dr. Upadhyay.
Thank you. And I'm really honored. Thank you.
Pleasure, sir. With that, we move on to EPID updates, and it's my honor to request our one and only Senior Vice President, Dr. Rajiv Kumar Jain, to please educate us, inform us, and also guide us where we stand when it comes to COVID-19 pandemic current situation and where we are heading. Please, Secretariat, support in taking things ahead for Dr. Jain's screen.
Dr. Jain, you please start your deliberation. You are welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Pawan.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed Dr. Amit's discourse on chronic myeloid leukemia and the questions that followed and the discussion that occurred. And also, I want to congratulate you for actually conducting this webinar for the first time.
Thank you so much, sir. My privilege. And we can see a wonderful background, which is quite invigorating, quite energizing. We can feel the freshness that's behind you.
Thank you. So friends, today we are meeting in really an emergency situation. And Dr. Sandeep rang me up that we need to revive the weekly epidemiological updates on COVID-19 situation. And I said, it's always a welcome move to know the facts of the matter. What happens is that unless we know the facts and the data correctly from the right sources, we may not be able to actually conclude as to where we are. It's a deep sea that we are in at the moment. And that's why the background is on the beach with the deep sea. We are in the middle of deep sea and a really crisis situation in India. And when I say India, I mean India, because in the weeks and months that you are going to see, it shall be the epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic in the world. And I'm saying this before I present the data. You will actually, at the end of the presentation, you will also understand and you will agree that this conclusion is the most important conclusion that all Indians need to make today than yesterday. So I start my presentation. Is the presentation visible to you?
Yes, Dr. Jan, very much. It's in slide mode.
Yeah.
Presentation mode will be switched. Yes, it is quite visible.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we look at the title, COVID Epid Updates, the importance is epidemiology is a science of spread of diseases, and epidemiology for occupational health physician is a must. Through this pandemic, what we are trying to do in Delhi branch of Association of Occupational and Environmental Health is we are trying to understand the science of epidemiology through the pandemic, because that skill is common and that is an essential skill for any occupational health practitioner. So what we do, we look at the most authentic source for coronavirus disease pandemic in the world, that is the World Health Organization. There is a dashboard. If you go to the World Health Organization homepage, you will find the link for the coronavirus dashboard. And it is very interactive. I have taken a screenshot about, say, 15 minutes back, and you can toggle and tweak all the data that is available. So if you look at this position, which is the global position, last 24 hours, the world reported 8,487 cases. And out of 8 lakh, 2,17,000 were reported by India. 25% of the world cases were reported by India only. And Brazil reported 73,000 and United States reported 73,000. And 5 reported 61,000. Turkey is a very small country, yet it is reporting 61,000 cases last 24 hours. France reported 37,900 cases. If you recollect, last year, in the thick of the pandemic, France was still there. It is still there in the top 5. And Germany again, 25,000 cases. Argentina, a new entrant in the top 10, 25,157 cases. Now, if you look at the top 3, they constitute 50% of the cases in the world. And they belong to 3 different continents of the world: Asia, South America, and North America. A true pandemic rolling out. And if you see, France, Germany together are also reporting more than 60,000 cases. And if you add entire Europe, Europe is still in the thick of pandemic. And India is in the thick of pandemic. South America is in the thick of pandemic. Only which can say is recovering is United States of America, and that to some extent. Now we look at the figures in terms of deaths newly reported in the last 24 hours, which is the right side column. The world reported 12,900 deaths, out of which 3,400 were reported by Brazil. India reported 1,185 deaths, second highest in the world. So top in terms of new cases and second highest in terms of deaths. As you know, there is always a lag of 14 days between the cases and the deaths. And what is predicted, India shall be the top contributor to the total deaths in any 24 hours. The third highest is by United States of America, 772. Turkey is also a contributor, but if you rank in terms of deaths, Poland, Mexico, Ukraine, Russia, Italy, Argentina are in the top 10. So Eastern Europe is in the thick of pandemic now. Poland, Ukraine, Russia, number of countries are in terms of deaths are reeling with huge number of deaths today. And if you look at the cases, also Eastern Europe is also becoming a problem area in the world. So it is evolving for the worse. Now we come to India. In the last 24 hours, India has detected 233,757 new cases, 233,757 new cases in 24 hours, and 1,338 deaths. 1,338 deaths, and 15 lakh tests yesterday, which is the highest test done in any 24 hours in India. Now, if you look at test positivity rate, it is at the current juncture 13.5%. 13.5%. Very grave situation. 16.7 lakh active cases and are growing at 7%. Both the number of active cases is very high and growth rate is also very, very high. Total, we have 14.5 million cases, which is number 2 in the world, and 1,75,673 deaths, which is number 3 in the world. India has given about 12 crore doses of vaccination against COVID-19 till today afternoon. This is the real diagram, and this tells a lot about what is happening and what is going to happen in India, because it is the reality of Indian subcontinents that you are seeing now. What you see on the left are the confirmed cases in 24 hours. As you can see, out of 233,000, 63,000 cases were reported by Maharashtra. And really a new entrant in the top 5 is Uttar Pradesh. We will learn more about what is happening in Uttar Pradesh shortly. 27,000 cases. Delhi, 19,486 cases yesterday. But today the Chief Minister has announced already Delhi has reported more than 24,000 cases in a single day, increase of 4,000 in 24 hours. Chhattisgarh has also reported, which is continuing 15,000 cases. Karnataka is again entering its grave phase, 14,800. Madhya Pradesh, 11,000. Kerala, 10,000, not changing at all. Kerala continues to reel under a severe pandemic. Gujarat is again entering 8,920. Tamil Nadu 8,449. So if you see the top 10, these are the states and they are spread all across India. They are not confined to one part of India. Now we look at the deaths. Deaths, earlier if you recollect, we were hardly reporting less than 100. Now we're reporting 1,338 deaths in the last 24 hours. Out of which about 400 are from Maharashtra, 141 are from Delhi. Chhattisgarh again has started reporting very high number of deaths, 138. Uttar Pradesh again has started reporting very high number of deaths, 103. Gujarat 94, Karnataka 78, Madhya Pradesh 60, Jharkhand 56, Punjab 50, Tamil Nadu 33. Now, if you look at tests per million per day, this particular column is important to understand and interpret the TPR. Unless we conduct huge number of tests, TPR will be underestimation. So any state which is doing high number of tests, their TPR is realistic. Any state which is having low tests per million per day, their TPR is an underestimate of real situation. So Delhi is doing the maximum. Pondicherry, Telangana, Uttarakhand, Chandigarh, J&K, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Mizoram are in the top 10. One good thing is that Maharashtra has started testing the double of Indian average now. So their report is more realistic and true to the reality. But on the other hand, Indian average of 1,104. So what does it mean? West Bengal is testing very less number of tests per million. They need to buckle up again. Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Meghalaya, Rajasthan are areas of concern or the states of concern. Areas also includes Bihar, 821, which means they are not testing to full capacity. They need to increase their capacity. As you will see, the 7-day average test positivity rate, which is India's 13.5, there are more than 10 states which are higher than the Indian average. Which are those states? Chhattisgarh is reporting 28%, Maharashtra 24.8%, Goa 23%, Madhya Pradesh 18.5%, Delhi 14.4%, Chandigarh 13.8%, West Bengal 13.2%, Haryana 13.2%, Rajasthan 13.0%. So these are the states which are higher than the Indian average. And many of these states, if you see, they are not doing sufficient number of tests, especially West Bengal and Rajasthan. Now, if you see how India is facing the brunt at the moment, 1.37% is the 7-day average daily growth percentage. And if you look at this, there are more than 10 states having higher growth rate than Indian average as today afternoon. Chhattisgarh is having 3% growth. Uttar Pradesh is having 2.58%. Dadra and Nagar Haveli 2.53%. Madhya Pradesh 2.33%. Jharkhand 2.4%. Gujarat is 1.91%. Delhi 1.86%. Maharashtra 1.71%. Uttarakhand 1.59%. Rajasthan 1.58%. Bihar 1.56%. And Haryana 1.39%. So these are the states showing higher daily growth percentage compared to India. Now, if you look at the vaccinated person, state-wise, you will find another surprise that states which have very high pandemic situation are not the states which have very high vaccinated persons. So that is a situation which is also dangerous, because a weapon against immunity, a weapon against the pandemic is not being targeted. If you look at, I'll show you the Indian average is 7.27% are vaccinated persons with at least one dose. If you look at Maharashtra, it is 8.23%. If you look at West Bengal, it is 7.5%. Madhya Pradesh 7.4%. Punjab 6.38%. Jharkhand, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh are much less than the Indian average in terms of vaccinated persons. This is another chart which is important for all of us to understand. This is doubling time in terms of days of active COVID-19 cases across Indian states, with lowest doubling time at the top and the longest doubling time at the bottom. So what do you see? You see that Meghalaya, Bihar, Assam, Arunachal, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh, and Ladakh are showing less than 5 days doubling time, which is a dangerous trend because of two reasons. If you look at the states, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar are very densely populated. And if you have this doubling time, which is less than 5 days, you are sitting on an explosive situation, a really explosive situation in two major states of India, that is Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. And Assam you remember they had just had elections and they have doubling time of 4.3. Odisha 4.26. Many of the districts in Odisha are unreachable and have very poor health infrastructure. So in the days to come, we are going to see a serious stretching of the health resources as well as managerial resources in the days and months to come. This is the overall picture for India. In terms of recovered cases, there are blue. In terms of total deaths, it is red, and active cases are in gray. You can see the bottom gray chart, how it is going up, and it is going higher than the first wave, which we had seen sometime in August, September, up till November. It is again going up, and it is going up and up. This is a chart showing new daily cases, new confirmed cases, and the moving average of 7 days. If you look at the figure, how sharply, if you look at the gradient of the second curve, how sharply it has gone up, far outshooting the first wave that India had. And if you do not believe the India figures, when we see the statewide figures, then you will also realize things are going bad at the micro level also. The chart on the left shows daily recovered cases and the moving average 7 days. If you look at the figure, how it has gone up suddenly from February 16, and on the daily deaths and moving average 7 day on the right side, you again can see how from from March 1st, how deaths have started going up throughout, and they are continuing to go up. They crossed 1,000 2-3 days back, and now it is going up and up. There is no trend towards stabilizing or trend towards going down. This is a chart showing daily vaccinations and daily cases. Daily vaccinations are in pink and daily cases are in gray. So you can see the figures. India is showing inconsistent, though the vaccinations have increased, but it has plateaued. It has not continued to increase consistently with respect to the way the infection is growing all across the country. These are the daily tests, which is moving average. You must realize how the tests started coming down. And only after the second week of March, the tests have again gone up. But what we need to do, we need to conduct at least 25 lakh tests per day, which we are doing at 15 lakh per day. That is the epidemiological evidence. Now, this is a graphical picture of most states, how they are testing. Whether it is adequate depends on the TPR. If it is more than 5%, which is problematic. So TPR across states, as shown, this is Maharashtra, TPR is 15.8%. Kerala, it is 8.5%. Karnataka, it is 4.9%. Tamil Nadu, it is 4.7%. Andhra Pradesh, it is 6.1%. Do you see the rise? Some states are not showing the rise. Delhi, it is 4.9%. UP, it is 2.1%, and so on. West Bengal, if you see Chandigarh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Telangana, Haryana, what do you see? Do you see the reflection in terms of tests and infections, which is coterminous? More positive, more tests. That is the philosophy, which is not so if we look at the state-wise figure in terms of testing. This is overall proportion of cases from the states. Maharashtra is showing 25% of the Indian state. Kerala is 8.5, 8.4. Karnataka is 7.8. Tamil Nadu is 6.8. Andhra Pradesh is 6.6. Delhi is 5.5. This is the proportion of cases from the states. But if you look at the trends, is showing sharp increase. All states are showing sharp increase. All states without exception. All states in this graph. Punjab, Bihar, Haryana, Telangana state, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat. So cases are showing a very, very sharp increase. Now we look at the hotspots. So hotspots are Delhi and Chhattisgarh. If you look at the gradient and how sharply and how high the cases have risen, highest growth in infection and no sign of slowdown. Maharashtra, we are seeing a very high growth, but early signs of slowdown have appeared, which is a good sign. We do not know whether it will be maintained for long or not. Kerala, Haryana, and Karnataka. This is Kerala, this is Karnataka, and this is Haryana. They have high and the growing infection. Uttarakhand is rapidly growing hotspot. It was below all India average until few days back. Now growing up the ladder. Please remember, Uttarakhand recently had the Kumbh Mela. And all the news, all of you are aware. Now we come to Delhi capital region, National Capital Region of Delhi. This is experiencing a major surge in daily cases of new COVID-19 cases. This is Delhi graph, and this is Gurgaon, this is Faridabad, this is Ghaziabad, this is Gautam Budh Nagar, Noida, this is Meerut, Alwar, Karnal, Sonipat, Rohtak, Panipat, Muzaffarnagar, Bharatpur, Bulandshahr, Jind, Bhiwani, Jhajjar, Mahendragarh, Hapur, Palwal, Shamli, Bagpat, Nuh, Charkhi Dadri. So what do you see? Hardly any town, whether big or small, has been left out of this huge surge in cases of COVID-19. And these are towns surrounding Delhi, and they belong to Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, and are populated, and there is a very mobile population, huge number of mobile population, because they come to work in Delhi and they go back to the towns where they have the houses or the fields or the farms. So this is a real micro picture of the pandemic rolling out in the hotspot area of India, that is Delhi NCR. This is again interesting in terms of epidemiology. We have been talking about R value. The latest estimated R value across regions generating more than 100 daily cases. Some areas hit early are slowing down. That is Punjab, Chandigarh, Maharashtra, but very rapid growth in Assam, Bihar, and UP. Also more than 2 in Delhi, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, and Odisha. So what you see, higher the number, higher is the multiplication and infection spread in the community. You see, this is UP, this is Bihar, and this is Assam, and this is Delhi, this is Jharkhand, this is Odisha, and this is Rajasthan, and this is Telangana, this is Uttarakhand, and this is West Bengal, and this is, you can see how Chhattisgarh, all states, this huge number of states are showing R value more than 1.5. So area of concern for entire India. A bit about what is R. Every 2 people in India infected with SARS-CoV virus on average pass on the coronavirus to at least 3 people. This estimation is based on an epidemiological parameter known as the effective reproduction rate, which is depicted as RT, which for India at the moment is estimated to be around 1.5 to 1.6. The effective R number takes into account factors relating to how the virus jumps from person to person. For instance, the basic infectivity of the virus, the probability of an actual infection during contact, and the duration of contagiousness. These are the factors which determine transmission. How this number varies across states not only reflects how serious an outbreak may have become, but it can also help predict emerging hotspots. Here is what this number says about the various states. So this is what you're seeing, 4.5, 13.5. But if RT for Bihar, if we see 1% infecting 3, then 9, then 27. So double of as is happening in India. If you look at the top and the bottom, the speed is double. So RT, 1 means every infected person is passing the virus to at least someone else. The higher this number is, the larger the outbreak becomes each time the virus jumps to new hosts. For example, look at the difference between national RT and that in Bihar. This is a graph which shows states like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, and West Bengal. RT is in red, and last week's TPR is in terms of purple. And change in points in 4 weeks is in the brackets in black. And this graph is showing new cases. Jharkhand, if you see, Chhattisgarh, if you see, Delhi, West Bengal, all are showing more than 2 RT. So 5 states, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, West Bengal, and Rajasthan have an effective R number above 2. And the test positivity rate in these regions are beyond 5% threshold, indicating that the outbreak is far from under control. Together, TPR and RT suggest the rate at which the outbreak is growing in these regions is not only among the fastest, but true numbers could be even higher, since testing may not be detecting all positive cases. So these states require testing and containment to be improved and additional health resources readied. This is graph showing for Bihar and UP. Bihar is having RT 2.95, UP is having 2.77. And if you look at the last week's TPR, it is only 2.3%. UP was only 4.5%. But look at the new cases, how the graph is rising. UP is very, very scary. In absolute terms, Bihar and UP have the highest effective R numbers. In Bihar, 1 person alone is estimated to be passing on the infection to 3 people. Those 3 to 9 and the 9 further to 27. But this could be momentary, as both states were reporting low numbers and have only just begun to register cases, thereby showing a low base effect. This is further enforced by the test positivity rate in both regions being under 5%. But these regions are geographically large areas with patchy surveillance and resources. The spike in the R number is stark enough for authorities to analyze how cases are clustering and consider interventions to stop them from spreading. Now we look at the future red states where situation may be worse than testing shows. Andhra Pradesh presently 1.72 R, Karnataka 1.62 R, Haryana 1.59 R. These are the regions where the test positivity rates have risen significantly over the past month. The effective R numbers in these regions are a little above the national average, which means the outbreak is still growing significantly, although it may not be as bad as some of the other regions. These are states where the control over the outbreak is precarious, and they are likely to benefit immediately from a strong focus on test, trace, and treat. Test, trace, and treat, if done in a focused manner, are going to give dividends to control the pandemic in these states. Now we look at what about Maharashtra. Intervention effect is unclear in Maharashtra. The state of Maharashtra is the second lowest effective R number. That is after Punjab's 1.07 at 1.38. Although it still has the highest TPR at 25.3%, which was last week, it is likely that the state's R number will have a more conclusive direction over the next few weeks when the effect of measures such as curfews and lockdowns play out fully. So that is the situation in terms of predictions and in terms of epidemiological evidence that is available. And the confounding factor is depicted in this picture very graphically and very clearly. what you are seeing is the different kind of strains that are variants that are available in India. Right from the bottom, blue B.1, B1.1.1, and then going up to top red B.1.617, B.1.617. What do you see? If you look at this picture at the top, red was very little, and how it has started growing. This is from January 1, 21 to April 4, 21. So if you look at the picture now, from the month of end of March, how it has grown. This variant is causing the real havoc in the country. B.1.617 and also B.1. These are the two major variants today in our country. So double mutant variant B.1.617 has been the most prevalent in the samples sequenced and uploaded to the global open access database. This database is available in the public domain. Please remember, only variants get converted to mutated viruses. We do not know how much spread is there on the ground. As we go along, sequencing will reveal further truth. But the new variant B.1.617 is causing real situation in a very fast manner. It spreads very fast. And also people who may have been infected in the first phase are getting infected with this variant. So that is another confounding factor. So the person who has suffered in the first phase may not feel, should not feel, must not feel safe, because it is the virus has evolved. That is molecular evolution. This is molecular epidemiology, and virus will continue to become smarter as we go along. So be prepared to become smarter than the virus. Keep your guard on, remain vaccinated, do not compromise COVID appropriate behavior anywhere, anytime. Only then you can hope to beat the virus at its game. This game will continue, and you need to show your resilience. You need to show how strong you are and how strongly you confront the virus and face this virus in a very strong, united manner, and also be prepared to organize your health resources, healthcare infrastructure in a manner that can face this unbelievable epidemic, pandemic, or upsurge, or the biggest challenge that India has faced post-independence. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this situation in India that we have. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Sharma, for taking up this initiative of sharing this situation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jain, sir, for sharing this exhaustive and elaborate overview of this, sharing thoughts over a scary situation, and also sharing wonderful insights when it comes to numbers and where we are heading to. I now hand over the stage to Dr. Sandeep Sharma and to take the proceedings further from here. We definitely would have a lot of questions and coming from the panelists as well as from the guests. Let's take them one by one and have a good discussion further.
Thank
Good
you,
evening, Dr. Sharma, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pawan, and thank you, Dr. Rajiv, sir, for taking all this initiative. And yes, we can do a lot of things which we need to do during this COVID-19 pandemic, and we need to remain updated, because right now the situation is now becoming worse from bad, and every management is now perturbed by the situation, and this business continuity is very important right now, especially for the essential services, and that is the reason why managements are holding day in day out meetings for controlling this pandemic, and we all need to be aware of the latest situation, how to take care of this pandemic, how to take care of our workforce. And for that reason only, I requested Dr. Rajiv Kumar Jain to hold this COVID rapid update almost on weekly basis. We can do that, and OcuHealth escapes we can do on the monthly basis. And in addition to the webinars, whenever we are having these webinars. So thank you, Dr. Rajiv Kumar Jain sir. Now, may I request all the panelists to unmute themselves, or they can put on their videos, or I can ask questions from all the panelists who have raised their hands. So Dr. Auditor, you can ask question. Yeah. Dr. Sanjay.
Good evening, Dr. Rajiv. Yeah, that was a fantastic eye-opener session by you. I only wanted to ask you one thing. The variant 1.617, is it basically transmitted through air?
Hello.
That is important. Only yesterday the Lancet article has come about this. One must understand this air transmission business. If you read the article, you will understand what does it mean. In enclosed environment, closed environment, if the air is having this virus, the multiplication is possible. So you have to be very cautious in remaining for longer time without COVID appropriate behavior in a closed environment, right? Yeah. Open spaces are safe. Road, parks are safe. But if you are in a metro, you are in a bus, you are in a room, auditoria, cafeteria, you are vulnerable. That is what the current evidence shows.
A nice presentation, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. Dr. Pingley has asked in the chat box, apart from vaccination, what measures are suggested on the part of the government? This is important because exactly at 8 o'clock, the Prime Minister is holding a meeting. Almost an emergency meeting on COVID at the moment. As you must have seen in the daytime, a lot of decisions have been announced, both for containment as well as treatment. Number one, all persons coming from Kumbh Mela, irrespective of the state, all states have announced today in the afternoon, you must have seen, all chief ministers have gone to the press and have announced any person coming from Kumbh Mela will be put to RT-PCR test, all the people, and they will not be allowed to go to their village or town, right? That's number one. Number two, the remdesivir prices have been controlled, have been reduced by about 1,000 rupees, and production have been enhanced. Number three, the vaccine production has been ramped up and public finances have been arranged. Number four, all the states have been now on guard to improve the testing. Number two, they have been now holding their administration very tight and on leash to enforce COVID appropriate behavior and also lockdowns and curfews in a very staggered and progressive manner based on the data that is available to them. This, I think that the major learning that district administration is now having a graded.
We lost your voice, sir. Okay. Yeah, so meanwhile, if any of our panelists would like to share thoughts on the data and facts that Dr. Jain has shared, I think there was an interruption in the... Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes, Dr. Lele, please.
See, it was an excellent presentation. And like what Dr. Rotito said, it is an eye-opener. But at the same time, I just want to understand who is responsible for this mess. Is it the central people or state people who are at helm? Those who are not community specialists, community medicine specialists, But physicians, cardiologists, who don't understand what is an epidemic, they are more interested in treatment, building hospitals, building equipment and whatever, but they have neglected the community's medicine part. That is what I feel. I don't know. I mean, one can debate about.
I don't think that is the way to analyze a pandemic. If you look at the structure of government in India and how disasters are to be managed as a social happening, National Disaster Management Act and National Disaster Management Authority are under the Ministry of Home Affairs, whether in the center or the states, the same situation. They are not under the health. They are under the Ministry of Home Affairs, because the response of pandemic has to be, disaster response has to be multi-pronged. So in multi-pronged disaster, administration has to take the lead, and they have to take inputs from various sources and various departments. Multiple inputs are taken, and then a decision is made. In India, if you look at the Prime Minister level, he's taken the lead. What else you could require? Home Minister has taken the lead. Health Minister has taken the lead. Together, these three ministers are leading the response at the center. Same situation in the states. This is a very good positive response. I must say Indian leadership is showing very effective way to manage under very resource constrained environment. So let's go ahead and let's face the situation as it is. And it's a difficult journey, but we will come out stronger after this journey.
No, I'm not disputing about the leadership. All I'm disputing about is the health people who are at helm. You know, the cardiologists, orthopedic surgeons, physicians, pediatric surgeons, and all kinds of things. There is nothing like community medicine specialists there.
No, they are there. In the public health specialist cadre of Central Health Service, all the teams which have gone to the states to help the state governments have one person from the public health cadre of Government of India. And they are qualified public health specialists selected by Union Public Service Commission. There is no doubt on that. There are qualified people in not only so-called community medicine or preventive social medicine, but in the subject of health administration, and they have vast experience and exposure and training, and their capabilities are no doubt. But so let's not debate on that. This will continue. In any pandemic, this will happen. One should learn how to collaborate and work as a team. I think that is going on.
Sir, I'll give you one example. Yeah, I'll give you one example. In Maharashtra, they said, go for more tests. So they ordered for more tests. The problem was, for routine, basically the people wanted to get their checked, but the lab samples were not processed for five days. And that was very dangerous.
That has been red flag.
Okay. We have faced some interruption again in Dr. Jain's internet, probably. We have a question from Dr. Vidya Kiran Bhatt regarding Maharashtra situation, that now we are witnessing lots of negative RT-PCR and other PCR tests. Actual numbers look much higher. Many labs in Maharashtra are suspended, just like Dr. Tihor, you just mentioned that probably tests are taking time. So anyone from Maharashtra or would like to comment on this, please. Many labs in Maharashtra have suspended RT-PCR tests and reports are delayed. Still, state is reporting 65,000 plus cases. So any comments from our esteemed panelists from Maharashtra?
The tests are taking a lot of time now, at least 4 to 5 days.
Yeah.
And that is a definite. I mean, even the authorized people, they are saying they are not accepting samples also. For a couple of days, they had stopped accepting samples. That's a fact.
Okay.
And you get the results only after 4 or 5 days. That is a fact.
Connection was lost.
No problem. Yeah.
Saying was that Maharashtra, fortunately, only thing is, I do not know whether this second wave in Maharashtra was the last wave. There can be more waves in Maharashtra. That is the only possibility.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jain. Dr. Thyagaraja is available and probably would like to share his thoughts. Dr. Thyagaraja, please.
Thank you very much, sir. It is one of the finest lecture we have heard, especially about the chronic myeloid leukemia by Dr. Amit Upadhyay. It's a very good. Welcome to.
Dr. Sharma, आपका माइक्रोफोन ऑन है. Yes, I'll just try to do that. So sorry for this interruption, Dr. Thyagarajan. Yeah, please, Dr. Thyagarajan. Yeah.
Yeah, and Rajiv Kumar Jain ji, it's a very beautiful update you have done, and we just wanted to ask, you have any idea that this kind of very sudden prop up this COVID has become second wave, has become very this one, and especially in Bangalore, most of the doctors are feeling that they don't have even the beds are not available to them, and most of the hospitals, the lack of oxygen is there, and it is such a grave situation, and the doctors are not getting admission in an hospital. And what's your opinion regarding this one? Can it be possible? Is it a good thinking that we should go for a lockdown or this one, or this situation to be faced as it is?
As you know, Dr. Thyagarajan, a lockdown has a very limited role. If you are short of resources and you feel you need to develop the resources within the lockdown period, yes, go for lockdown. But lockdown only postpone the situation. They do not control the situation in effective manner, because you have to have on the ground enforcement machinery for the lockdown as well. So from an epidemiological perspective, graded response is a better response. We should be able to grade our response in a micro manner, and also ensure that resources are available and can be organized in relation to the need of the people in that geographical area. Let's hope situation will change. You see, this virus is very smart, and this keep on changing. This is changing very fast in India now. So unpredictability of the situation is one of the confounding factor. How the response in terms of vaccination, you were yourself witnessing vaccine hesitancy was an issue, and people became complacent in enforcing, in adopting COVID appropriate behavior in the months of March and February as well. So what was expected with huge rollout of vaccine was expected that huge acceptance would be there even in healthcare workers and frontline workers. That vaccine hesitancy was substantial, and that followed in people who are above 60 years. That is also being seen in people above 45 years. So that is a social issue, and also availability is an issue, production is an issue. One cannot say this decision was right, one cannot say that decision was wrong. In a particular situation, one kind of decision is taken, and I feel that is the right way to go about. And it's a pandemic, one should not remember. A global response and graded response has to go in conjunction with local response. So you cannot separate the two. It's a pandemic, means everybody has to collaborate and cooperate and collaboratively work, whether in India or in a district or in a village or in a town or at the WHO or at the world level. This is the way it will happen. In fact, Dr. Pingle has raised a very important issue. I felt Tika Utsav, he is trying to drive the point that during Tika Utsav, the total vaccination that were done, that were less than the vaccination done in the previous week. So that's a fact. But we have to remember, 11 to 14 was a Tika Utsav, out of which one was Sunday and another was a gusted holiday. In spite of that, this achievement is very good, a kind of push in terms of awareness generation for vaccination, increase in the number of vaccination centers, and in testing your capability to actually go for the next level, that is workplace vaccination. So we have evolved in terms of vaccination strategy, and time will show how this vaccination strategy will help us in preparing ourselves better. because you're going to see this vaccination strategy continuing into June, July, August, September, October, November. Please don't forget that. We are preparing the ground for a sustained vaccination of good proportion of population. So it's not a short-term, one-day affair.
It is a long-run process, sir. And now, since government has made it mandatory for all government employees to get themselves vaccinated, even the corporates now, they are posing, they are asking all their age-appropriate people like 45 years and above to get themselves vaccinated. Otherwise, they might even take necessary decision not to extend some benefits to them if they are not taking vaccination. So those strict measures are now being taken by various corporates now. And our main issues are in India is our population. And that we have, many times we have stressed this, mutations are all because of transmission. And transmission is maximum where the maximum population is there. So, and we are not following any COVID appropriate behaviors. Such a lot of crowds are there, festival seasons are there, elections are there, Kumbh Mela is there. And we are just ignoring everything. And because of this, transmission is occurring. And when more and more transmission is occurring, more and more mutations are occurring. So maybe after some time, we will have some Indian variant which will come in addition to this UK and other variants, which will be uncontrollable in India.
Very true.
Yeah. Because these variants, they develop only when there is transmission. Because when they replicate, they cause mutations. And here temperature variations are there, other variations are there. So maybe some new mutant will come and that can cause a havoc in India. So we have to be very much prepared for all these things and follow all these COVID appropriate behaviors and get vaccinated. That is more important.
Great. So thank you. If there are any more questions from panelists or the guests, we can definitely take up.
There are some observations in the chat box. Dr. Pawan, have you taken them?
Yes, let me have, yes, all of them have been addressed, Dr. Sharma. Okay. The last one was from Dr. Pingle, and then thanks from Dr. Rajiro. So I have been following it. Just in case anyone, any chat got missed, please unmute yourself and then you can definitely share your thoughts. Dr. Thyagaraja was trying to say something. The connection was interrupted. I hope, Dr. Thyagaraja, you have addressed your points, right? Okay, done. So over to you, Dr. Sharma, and then for the conclusion.
Thank everyone for sparing their valuable time. Now it is almost more than 1.5 hours, almost 2 hours. And this was a great session. And thank you, Dr. Rajiv Jain sir, also for giving all your valuable inputs, because these are the inputs which we should be aware from the authentic sources rather than believing on the TV news and newspaper news, because there are many questions which are being raised by the management right now, and we should be able to answer all those queries. And these such forums only they can help us out for this. So thank you.
Hand has been raised by Dr. Sanjeev Kulkarni. If at all there is any quick question, then we can definitely take.
Yeah, that can be a last question.
Yeah, last question of the session.
Dr. Kulkarni, sir. You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Kulkarni.
Yeah. Okay, some technical glitch, I guess.
Anyway, Dr. Pawan, we can conclude the session.
Yes, please. Yeah. So thank you. So, yes, for sure, Dr. Sharma. Thank you so much. My gratitude to all who have stayed for so long and for wonderful discussion, and definitely the details shared by, we are very thankful to Dr. Jain, as Dr. Sharma has already expressed his gratitude. We look forward to connecting again with more updates. And
next week again on Saturday we'll connect, and we'll have more updates from Dr. Rajiv Jain sir, and some guest faculty will also be there as per the requirement. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.